Everybody, this is John from MTG Nexus with some more Green Devotion Gauntlet testing. This time we're going to be doing Green Devotion versus Mono Red Aggro. As a friendly reminder, if you like what you're seeing on the channel, please consider subscribing, giving us a thumbs up, and leaving a constructive comment down below, as we aim to provide a repository of information for people to check out various matchups from both Pioneer and Modern, with our end goal doing every single major matchup in all formats, but once again, this will take time. So today, this is the Mono Green Devotion list we've been working with for the last couple of videos. If you want to check that out, we'll have a link to the playlist of various matchups we've played so far, which so far has included Simic Nexus, Mono Black Aggro, and Is It Phoenix? This particular go-around, we're doing Mono Green Devotion versus Mono Red. Typically, in history, Mono Red has struggled with decks that outsize it. Green Devotion is certainly a deck that can outsize it, and with 4 copies of Nylea's Disciple, it's theoretical that this would probably be one of the better, more reasonable matchups that Green Devotion's had of the matchups we've played so far. The other ones not appearing to be too particularly good, but then again, a lot of the format has been gunning for Mono Green of late. This video is being recorded circa November 2019, so keep that in mind if you are watching this for matchup purposes, that the deck lists and styles of decks may have changed. So, Mono Green Devotion, 8 Land War Elves, trying to get on the board quickly, once upon a time, still legal. Beyond that, you're using things like Burning Tree Emissary and Jadelight Ranger to get on the battlefield early, get Devotion about for things like Nykthos, also getting mana for Castle Garenbrig, to eventually your payoffs of Walking Ballista and Voracious Hydra, both of which are relevant in this matchup. Unlike previous matchups where Walking Ballista has kind of been mediocre at best, this one it should serve a pretty good purpose, as a lot of Mono Red's creatures have 1 and 2 toughness. And then your payoffs of Vivian, Arcbow Ranger, and Nissa, that shakes the world, creating an almost endless army of 3/3s to pressure your opponent back. Mono Red typically doesn't block very well, and then Vivian to kind of pump the team all serve various good purposes. Vivian's ability to go get either a Hornet Queen or an Ulamog might not be terribly relevant in this matchup, so I could definitely see cutting some Vivians in this matchup. As far as sideboard options, main things that will be coming in is the 4 copies of Nylea's Disciple. You could theoretically bring in Shaper's Sanctuary as well, but I don't know if trading 1 for 1 is what you want to be doing in this matchup, as we clearly are the control deck. So these are the 6 cards that could potentially come in, with these 4 of Nylea's Disciple being the ones you're going to generally lean towards in this matchup. That said, let's move on to the Mono Red matchup. This particular list is from George_Jung on Magic Online. This was a 6-1 finish in a Pioneer Challenge. The big thing with this deck is it is a more wizard-based thing, based off of a build, I believe, from Patrick Sullivan. You're using things like Soulscar Mage and Gitu Lava Runner to potentially turn on Wizard's Lightning, making you actually have a Lightning Bolt, which is extremely relevant for Mono Red in the format. As some of you have seen my attempting to play Mono Red and Boros Burn, there's been a severe lack of damage output from spells. Still, Wild Slash is pretty good in this matchup, hitting Mana Dorks, hitting Scavenging Oozes, hitting Burning Tree Emissaries, allow your creatures to get blockers out of the way. 16 1-drops, of which 8 have haste naturally, 4 more can get haste moving into turn 2 and turn 3. Beyond that, 4 copies of Lightning Strike, 4 copies of Searing Blood, all are going to be relevant when attacking Mono Green's creatures. Smuggler's Copter, allowing you to continue to hit the gas when you start floating out a little bit. Light Up the Stage, similar effects, trying to keep the gas flowing, and then 2 copies of Hazoret at the top end to kind of close things out. This card deck has a lot of interesting innovations in it. I think the biggest thing is the lack of Skewer the Critics. Wizard's Lightning taking that slot, and I think Wizard's Lightning makes a lot of sense when you're trying to get creatures out of the way, whereas Skewer the Critics I think is better as follow-up spells. So, main deck makes a lot of sense. 18 lands, 4 Ramen Up Ruins, Castle Embereth, so even if you are flooding out, there are some things to be doing with your mana. Beyond that, cards that might be relevant in the matchup, Lava Coil can deal with bigger creatures. Eidolon of the Great Revel could be reasonable, especially on the play. I don't know too much about the draw. Goblin Chain Whirler could be relevant in some spots. It's pretty good against Mana Dorks, but then again, at that point, if the Mana Dorks are still in play, you might be in some trouble anyway. And beyond that, Rampaging Frostodon could also be considered as life gain tech, as well as punishing your opponent for any creatures they might be playing. So, lots of cards that could potentially come in. Have to wait and see how the matchup plays out, see what cards our opponent brings in, but these are the cards These are the cards that could potentially see play in this matchup. Frenzy and Chandra don't seem like the style of matchup. Smash obviously has no relevant targets. Eidolon would probably be good on the play, not so much on the draw. And Chain Whirler might be in a very similar vein. And it can match up decently well with a lot of what they have going on, although it does not match up with the upper end of a lot of what's going on. Frostodon, this was a tool that's never really been in Standard at the same time as the Mono Green Devotion deck, so this would be an interesting tool. And then Lava Coil just as a better removal spell in some spots. Anyways, on to the matches. We're here for match number 1. We'll be on the play. So, taking a look at this opening hand, it's pretty reasonable. Have one Llanowar Elves into Burning Tree, potentially into Voracious Hydra or Ballista. One major problem this hand has is if the Llanowar and the Burning Tree get answered and we don't draw any more lands, we're going to get stuck here, but still a hand that's perfectly defensible. Lead on Elf, opponent goes on Swiftspear. We draw a land, which is fortunate. Burning Tree. Unfortunately, we can only generate 3 mana here, which really doesn't do a ton, but run out a Voracious Hydra, try to increase our devotion, force our opponent to be able to answer our board, or we're threatening a turn 3 Nissa quite easily. Our opponent goes to attacks, no blocks, strikes down one of our Hydras. So here, we decide to run out Walking Ballista and just gun down the Swiftspear. May not be the most efficient use of resources, but I think it's key to keep the creatures off the board, because they're... One thing with the burn decks in this format, or red aggressive decks, is they don't have enough burn to actually burn you out. They're kind of reliant on their creatures to actually kill you. Get a Vivian down here, get a 3/3 Elf. Opponent decides to kill our Elf. They're just ignoring the Vivians, so they continue pressuring our life total. Problem we have now is we don't have any good things to do with our mana, or enough mana to cast Nissa. I do make one small mistake here. I should have used Nykthos to cast this once upon a time, so in case we find an Elf, we could cast the Elf, which we're punished because we do see an Elf, but I think the best take here is probably Scavenging Ooze, because it's the one card that can kind of take over the game on its own, gain us some life, etc. Bomat Courier doing Bomat Courier things. Play out the Scavenging Ooze. Just wanted to check the Nykthos Devotion, but the results are the same. Immediately eat something here, that way. We immediately eat something and then you use Vivian to pump it up, so hopefully this will be enough to slow our opponent down. Fortunately, our opponent has Hazoret with only 1 card in hand. They go attacking. We could potentially block Hazoret here, but then we literally have nothing on board, so this is kind of like hoping that we can leverage Nissa here. But I don't think it's quite good enough. Let's pressure our opponent, and then could eat things now, but that leaves us 1 less blocker, and we're more vulnerable. Unfortunately, our opponent has a Lightning Strike, which forces us to tap a blocker. Go to 1 here after the Lightning Strike, and then we're just dead to them activating Smuggler's Copter. So, I mean, there was any different number of ways we could have died there. Could have gained the life, but then once again we're tapping on lands. We kind of have to hope our opponent gets sloppy or doesn't draw well. So, unfortunate, but, you know, like I mentioned at the beginning, if our opponent answered our first couple of creatures, we could be in some trouble, and they did just that with the, double Wizard's Lightning Strike into Wizard's Lightning. So, we were set up for a turn 3 Nissa, but our opponent had enough disruption. That's one of the issues with facing off against Mono Red, is just simply the fact that their deck is one of the few decks in the format with multiple forms of potential turn 1 and turn 2 removal pretty consistently, between Wild Slash, Wizard Lightning, Searing Blood, and all those various spells. So, anyways, on to sideboarding. So as far as sideboarding, we boarded out a mixture of things this game. A couple copies of Walking Ballista, one Nissa, one Vivian, because we're bringing in 4/4 drops in the form of Nylea's Disciple. Could consider bringing in Shaper's Sanctuary. The problem with Shaper's Sanctuary is you're spending a mana that sometimes you don't often have, and while you are the control deck, you need to play to the board. First hand was risky. Cycled through it a little too quickly. Basically, there was a forest and an elf, and that was all the mana, and if the elf got answered, we were kind of in some trouble. This hand's a lot more defensible. Even if the elf gets answered, we still have a couple Jade Lights on 3. I think this is a keep, probably putting back one of the forests. And while it is dangerous, you really don't want to put back either of the Jade Lights, and really don't want to put back Nissa, because you do need a payoff to kind of win the game. Opponent starts attacking us. Looks like they're stuck on lands. So we see a burning tree. It's possible I was supposed to let the burning tree on top, just in case. That way we could pump our Jade Light and make it more difficult for them to attack. Bidding Once Upon a Time. We really don't have time to cast it right now. Our opponent is stuck on one land. Cast another Jade Light. They Wild Slash in response to the Explore trigger. Get rid of the Elf, because it really doesn't serve a whole lot of purpose right now. Place out another Swift Spear. We start going to town with Nissa here. Start pressuring them. Cast our own Elf. Plays. So we're getting very lucky that our opponent is stuck on mana here. That is one of the risks of the mono red deck, is they can just get stuck on lands sometimes. This attack might be ill-advised because they could double block one of our lands, and I think that's exactly what they do here. And I should have taken out the Gitu Lava Runner, but Swift Spear does have the potential to become a 2/3, so in some regards that might have been the correct attack. And then our opponent just scoops here because they're continuing to be stuck on one land, and we're able to present quite a bit of pressure between Nissa and such. So, and our opponent knows there's a Nissa on top of our deck, so even if they answer this Nissa, they're just kind of hopelessly outmatched, and we're able to counter pressure them back. One of the things going on here is, while our opponent did have plenty of early disruption, they did get stuck on one land, which when your deck only runs 18 mana sources, can happen on occasion. So this is one way mono green can win, is the mono red deck stumbling, and vice versa. Mono red can win when mono green stumbles. So be mindful of that when you're making your mulligan decisions on both sides of the equation. Left sideboarding the same for game 3. Possible we should have made some adjustments, maybe some Walking Ballistas back in to have some more early plays. This hand's perfectly reasonable. We have Llanowar into Jade Light if they don't answer Llanowar, or we just potentially have Scavenging Ooze on 2, which could potentially take over a game, requiring them to have multiple answers. The problem is they are on the play, which means they get to leverage their creatures a little bit better. So it looks like they're stuck on lands again. It looks like they drew out Swift Spear into Wizard's Lightning. Now they get to start pressuring us. This is what I mean by mono red leveraging their creatures. So we could run out Scavenging Ooze here and pump it once, but I think it's better to get Jade Light Ranger out, try to hit some land drops. Put the Ballista in the yard, which may or may not be correct. I think we have enough plays that we're just kind of digging for mana right now. Opponent Searing Bloods, once again, continues to leverage their cards, dealing us a lot of damage. We get to Scavenging Ooze here. So the big problem with this play is, well, I think it is the correct one. You could certainly argue that you're supposed to play Voracious Hydra and fight Soulscar Mage. But ironically, because of the templating on Soulscar Mage, as I found out in a later game, it actually takes away some of the counters from Voracious Hydra, because it deals non-combat damage, which is kind of funny. But the one problem with even this 4/4 Scavenging Ooze is it would normally trade for multiple cards here, but because of the presence of Soulscar Mage, any burn spell here is a problem. Our opponent's attacking, but we can't really afford to take the damage. Of course, they have a Lightning Strike, reduces our lose to a 1/1. They continue to leverage their ability. So Could do a couple of things here. Could play Anissa, and we have a 3/3, but then we're losing lands. So I decide here to try to take advantage of a 2-for-1. What I didn't realize at this point was the interaction with Soulscar Mage, that I was talking about momentarily, which did reduce the size of a Voracious Hydra. Because the key toughness with Mono Red usually is 4. Because that means most of their spells can't kill creatures. Another Voracious Hydra. Once again, you could be arguing I'm supposed to get Nissa out, but I just want to get a body on the field, kill one of our opponent's creatures. It's possibly incorrect to start attacking here, but you do need to pressure Mono Red back, because if you give them too much time, they can turn around and, start to cause issues. I think this is the correct attack. It's possible I'm supposed to attack with both Voracious Hydra, the 3/4 Hydra, and the Forest here. Keeping in mind the Smuggler's Copter could take care of this Voracious Hydra if it attacked. Made the more conservative attack, which may or may not have been correct, and then use Jadelight Ranger to try to set the game up to be closed out next turn. Opponent fires up Smuggler's Copter, and at this point, since we have no blockers, basically any burn spell will do, and they play Goblin Chain Whirler and kill us exactly. So, and then once again, Goblin Chain Whirler and Soulscar Mage is an absolute absurd combo. Something that probably isn't explored enough in this format from the Mono Red decks, but unfortunately a loss here just when we're starting to stabilize, our opponent able to get us with that last few points of damage. So, anyways, on to match number 2. Back here for match number 2 of Mono Green Devotion versus Mono Red. Unfortunately, we're on the draw, but this hand is still pretty reasonable, especially if Mystic doesn't get an answer, but even Jadelight on 3 and a Vivian on 4 could be reasonable. Opponent mulligans to 6. Leads on Lava Runner. Elf go. Wild Slash, kill the Elf. Play on 2, unfortunately. Opponent with another Lava Runner to run out. Jadelight, keep the Burning Tree on top, which may or may not be correct here. Opponent with the Wizard's Lightning, continue to pressure our life total. Burning Tree. Fortunately, not enough green mana to cast Vivian right now. Opponent slashes our. Draw another Burning Tree, which this time we do have enough mana. Filtering it through Nykthos to get the green. Get a 4/4 in their way. Attacks. Apparently that was to set up Light Up the Stage. Hitting a Lightning Strike and a Smuggler's Copter. Looks like they're stuck on lands. So using Nykthos to filter mana into Castle Garenbrig, which gives us 8 mana for Dorkos here. Walking Ballista, shoot their guys, start pressuring them. So once again, the lack of lands coming back to bite the Mono Red deck, and we're turning the quarter very, very quickly with Vivian in play, so no one has to block there, or they're just dead to Walking Ballista. Find a Walking Ballista off the Once Upon a Time. And at this point, there's nothing our opponent can do, even at 8 life. Just shows you, despite an intense amount of interaction and a good amount of pressure, if the Mono Red deck's not able to fully leverage itself with 2 to 3 lands, then it can easily get overwhelmed, even by answering our first, 3 or 4 plays quite easily. So, once again, we are the control deck, but we do turn the corner very, very quickly in, if we draw our mana in the right mix. So, anyways, on to game number 2 and sideboarding. Back for sideboarding for game number 2. Much in the same vein as last time, boarding out some of the top end, like a Walking Ballista, a Vivian, Anissa. This time a Jadelight Ranger for the 4 copies of Nylea's Disciple. Still not entirely sure what the right combination of things is to board out in situations like this, but we don't necessarily need all of our top end to beat them. This hand is a bit risky. There is no 1 mana Dork, But once again, this is one of those matchups where you can't really rely on mana dorks. And this hand does have the huge upside of if we hit land 3, can possibly go Burning Tree into Jadelight Ranger into Nylea's Disciple with a rather insane amount of devotion if our opponent's not able to answer all those in a timely fashion. And so our opponent mulligan to 6. Swift Spear go. Obviously have no play on one. They go Eidolon, which is problematic. As we discussed in the deck tech for Mono Red, definitely can see bringing in Eidolon on the play. On the draw, it's not quite as good because these Burning Trees would already be down. But here, they get to deal us some damage for playing them. But once again, what else we're going to do? We did hit Castle Garenbrig, so if they're not able to answer these Burning Trees, we get to go Jadelight, hopefully hit a land into Nylea's Disciple for quite a bit of life gain. Fortunately, they have a Wild Slash, take care of one. Wild Slash, take care of the other, hit us for 5. We get to play a Jadelight this turn, go 7 unfortunately. Made that a 4-3, so it's harder for it to kill. Fortunately, they have a Wizard's Lightning, so we're taking 4 damage this turn, going to 3. This Nylea's Disciple is decidedly less interesting, but maybe could stabilize here. Opponent with a Lightning Strike gets to put us to 1, which means we can't cast anything of X or less, so we have to play the Ballista here. With Castle Garenbrig, this is a nice little thing. So, I believe this is the turn that mistakes were made. So, this is a decision point. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to kill the Eidolon in response here and still have the 1/1 to block the Swift Spear, or if I'm supposed to wait as I did, block the Swift Spear, and then shoot the Eidolon. So it's possible either way. One of these creatures has to die, so it's possible this is a mistake here to not shoot the Swift Spear in response, but obviously the Eidolon kind of needs to die, and it's a lot easier to blank the Swift Spear. Block the Swift Spear, shoot the Eidolon, obviously have the problem of trying to answer 2 threats, and then we could cast Nissa here, but then we're just dying to Smuggler's Copter. So, very, very close to stabilizing. We did potentially have the curve out, but our opponent did have answers all the way. So, once again, when Mono Red draws its mana, it seems like this can be a difficult matchup, especially on the draw. Anyways, on to the third and final game in this match set. So we are on the play for game number 3, which is a good place to be in this matchup. This hand's pretty reasonable even without a 1-mana dork. Get to go Burning Tree into Scavenging Ooze. If we get to keep some of that mana around, potentially Nylea's Disciple on 3, especially if we hit another Burning Tree. Opponent with a Soulscar Mage. We get to go make a double play here. Opponent kills our Burning Tree Emissary, kills our Scavenging Ooze, play a Jadelight Ranger, put a Vivian in the graveyard, because we're aiming for a land, because we really need to get that Nylea's Disciple down. Opponent with a Chain Whirler to turn our Jadelight into a 2/1. No blocks here, because once again I'm trying to keep my devotion count high. We hit a Burning Tree into enough mana to play Nylea's Disciple. Thought about Nissa, but I don't know if the opponent's deck specifically runs any Skullcrack effects or anything, so you just want to get this down. Now we're kind of in a board stalemate with their 3/3 first striker making default to attack, but at the same time they really can't afford to attack either. Then we just kind of start doing the Nissa thing, taking over the game a little bit. Opponent kills our land. Once again, just kind of taking Nissa up. They kill our Jadelight, but we're really not in danger of taking much damage. Nissa's going to ultimate next turn if they don't do anything. And we ultimate Nissa, have another Nissa, and our opponent scoops to that. So, 2/3/3 indestructible lands, going to be making a third 3/3 indestructible land, can start attacking them, and because we're at 18 life and they only have 1 card in hand, seems like a pretty reasonable way. So, a lot of what goes on in this matchup seems to be about consistency. Mono green, well, yes, it can flood out. Has a lot more to do with its mana when it floods and such. The mono red deck seems to have a lot of issues with its 18 land count of either flooding out or not only getting stuck on 1 or 2 lands, not being able to leverage all of its spells. So I think this matchup is a little bit closer than some of the other matchups we've been playing. I think obviously the mono green devotion deck is the control deck, but it can turn the corner very quickly in this matchup. Mono red is usually in its best when it's playing creatures and then leveraging those creatures to pressure the mono green side's life total. So I think this matchup is very close. I'm not sure exactly which deck is favored. It probably largely depends on the particular configurations of the decks, but I do think this is a very interesting matchup. Having played a lot from mono red side in previous standard formats and such, this was never a deck archetype I like seeing. The brute force of their decks often cause my aggro decks problems. So historically, I think green decks are slightly favored over red decks because of the size of their creatures, but the ability to attack the mana dorks and such out of the mono green deck from the mono red side with all their efficient removal does make this matchup fairly close, if probably slightly favorable for mono green, as you saw from these 6 games. Each side won 3 games. So, anywho, that's kind of the wrap up for this. If you like what you're seeing on the channel, please consider subscribing, giving us a thumbs up, leaving a constructive comment down below, as we're trying to create a repository of various matchups for the Pioneer and Pioneer and modern formats. Pioneer is another channel. Anyways, thank you for tuning in. This has been John for MTG Nexus.